Hello, I'm Bella Talbot, Brand Executive at DK Eyewitness.
And I'm Rachel Laidler, Project Editor at DK Eyewitness.
And welcome to Where to Go, where every fortnight we find out more about the world's favourite travel destinations with the people who know those places best. Hello, Rachel. How are you?
I'm doing good, Bella. Thank you very much. I'm really excited about today's episode. Where are we off to?
I'm excited too because we're off to Hong Kong, which is a place I've always wanted to visit. Rachel, have you been?
I have been. I've been a couple of times actually, and I really loved it. I think the best time was when I stayed with a friend who lived on Llama Island, which is a little island that sits, I think it's slightly to the west of Hong Kong Island. And it was a super peaceful spot, so quite a contrast to like central Hong Kong itself. But it was nice to be able to, kind of like go there for a bit of peace and quiet and then nip back into the city for a bit of hustle and bustle as well. And I think the thing that I'm quite excited about today's episode for is because I've actually just started work on the update for Top 10 Hong Kong.
Of course,
so that's been reminded me. Yeah, I've been like reminded of all the amazing places that are there to explore. So I'm excited to, learn a little bit more about it.
Great. And who have we got on today joining us as our special expert?
Today's guest is lifestyle and travel writer Kee Foong. Born in Malaysia, raised and educated in Australia, and now based in Hong Kong, Kee has travelled the world, while writing for such publications as Travel and Leisure Asia, South China Morning Post, Tatler, Michelin Guide and Suitcase. He's also an Academy Chair for World's 50 Best Hotels. Welcome, Kee.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks for joining us, Kee.
Lovely to be on the show.
Great to have you on.
Thank you, Bella.
So, as usual, we'll start by learning a little more about our guest Kee, followed by his all-important recommendations of where to go and insider knowledge of Hong Kong. Then we'll hear about how to plan the best possible visit.
So, Kee, you've travelled all over the world and, in fact, lived all over the world. But how did you end up in Hong Kong?
In a nutshell, I did it for love.
Oh, nice. Lovely.
I'm from Sydney, or rather, I grew up in Sydney. My partner and I, we're both from Sydney, actually. He moved up to Hong Kong first for work, and we did the long distance thing for a couple of years. And then I ended up following him up to Hong Kong. And that was nearly 20 years ago.
Amazing.
Would it be fair to say you've never looked back?
I would say so, yes. I mean, Hong Kong has been an incredible place for me. It never occurred to me to move here or live here while I was growing up in Sydney. Sydney is an amazing place itself.
Yeah.
Really fantastic lifestyle. I was very happy there. But when the opportunity came up, I think we had to say yes.
I'm glad it all worked out. So, Kee, I have to ask, is reviewing luxury hotels the dream job that we all think it is?
If I'm being really honest,
Be honest.
yes, it is.
I'm so jealous.
It's a great job.
I've got to say, I had a little look at your Instagram before we started recording, and the levels of like wanderlust that it was giving me were sky high. It looks amazing.
It is a fantastic job. It is, I can honestly say, I love doing what I do, and I love the travel aspect of it. It is, I used to be, before I became a travel writer, I was a policy analyst back in Australia. Oh, wow. And I used to read travel stories and think, how do you become a travel writer? And then I moved to Hong Kong, and I met the publisher of a travel guide called Lux City Guides, and we hit it off. And he said, how would you like to help out with putting some of these guides together? And I thought, well, of course, absolutely. Definitely, that was it. And definitely from that perspective, I haven't looked back. It's been a great job. I should say, though, probably the biggest drawback, and I think anyone who's a travel writer will agree with this, is it's not something you do for the money. You do it because you love it.
Yeah, no wonder. And I mean, it sounds as though you've been to so many like fascinating places as well. And just honestly, you're, like I said before, your Instagram made me very, very jealous. It looks great.
Me too. I definitely had a jealousy scroll.
Yeah. So before we jump into the best things to do, we'd like you to tell us your absolute favourite thing about Hong Kong.
I think with my absolute favourite thing, it is the energy here. And I think that energy comes from the geography of Hong Kong. It's not a particularly big city or territory. It's smaller than London. There's about 7.5 million people here. So squeezed into what is a pretty compact space. So all these people in this small space just creates this great energy. And then, as I said, the geography as well. I mean, you're surrounded by mountains, you've got the harbour, you've got these skyscrapers everywhere. So it just creates, as I said, this dynamism, this energy. Visually, it's spectacular. I mean, if you come here, I think you will see for yourself that it's a wow kind of city. And I don't think, I mean, I've been to a lot of cities around the world, and I love most of the places that I've been to, and they're beautiful cities. But I think Hong Kong stands out for its wow factor in terms of its visual impact and its energy.
Am I right in thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's quite international, right? Because of where it's positioned. I guess a lot of people are moving through. Do you think that kind of contributes to the energy?
Absolutely. Hong Kong is, I would say, in many ways, the most international city in this region because it has a large expat community. It's a financial center. It is a travel hub as well. I have to say it took quite a hit, as you probably know, because of COVID. It closed its borders for one of the longest out of any city, and that did have an impact. I think a lot of people left as well. Quite a lot of my friends left, a lot of expats left. But at the same time, it is still an incredibly international city.
Great.
And I would put it in the same league as London and New York, Paris, those great cities, Tokyo. I think Hong Kong definitely still ranks up there.
Yeah.
It's up there. One for the bucket list.
It's funny talking about how just striking the city looks as well, because I've been to Hong Kong a couple of times before, and that was one of the things that really struck me is just, I don't know how much it like takes your breath away, like you said, with you've got these like huge skyscrapers contrasting with like green mountains behind, and like the hilliness as well of Hong Kong. That's something that really surprised me, that there was like fantastic hiking that you could go and do. So yeah, I think there were a lot of things that I found quite surprising about it as a city, and I suppose that adds to like the dynamic nature of it that you were talking about.
Yes, absolutely. It's a real, I wouldn't say assault on the senses, but it definitely is a feast for the senses.
Nice.
So, Kee, you've given us a fab introduction to Hong Kong, and now we're going to dive into the best things to do. So, to kick things off, we're going to ask you to give us a quick fire tour of Hong Kong. We're going to name a few categories, and you have to suggest just one thing to do. Are you ready?
As ready as I can be. I'm sure a lot of people say how difficult it is to say one thing, but I'll try.
They do, and usually we make it harder by asking follow-up questions because
Yeah.
we're just so intrigued. Okay, so first thing, favourite view.
Favorite view would be from the peak, because from up there you get this incredible perspective of Hong Kong. You've got the city, the heart of the city right in front of you. So these skyscrapers almost come up to the peak. And then you've got the harbour in front of you. You've got the Kowloon side, the new territories. Then you've got the mountains that are really the border with mainland China. So it's an absolutely amazing view.
When you say the peak of a mountain.
Yes, it is actually called the Peak. And
Okay.
I actually live in a neighbourhood called the Mid-Levels. And as the name suggests, it is midway between the harbour and the peak, or the top of what is called the peak. The peak is a mountain, but it's not a particularly high mountain. It's about, I don't know, I think it's about, I'll get in trouble for this, 500 meters or so. But yes, it gives you a great perspective on Hong Kong.
Would you recommend a particular time of day to go up there, or is any time good to get like an incredible view?
I think, like a lot of Asian cities, Hong Kong looks fantastic at night. But I think it's also great if you go early in the morning, the light is great, or if you go at sunset, the light is fantastic as well. But if you really want to see the lights that Hong Kong are famous for, go at night.
That sounds amazing. So moving on, what is your favourite thing to eat? I know Hong Kong's like a very foodie destination, so it's very difficult to pick just one thing, but have a go.
Well, I'm going to cheat a bit because I will say dim sum, because dim sum is really an assortment of dishes. And I think if you come to Hong Kong, it's something that you have to try. And there's just so many things that you can try when you're having dim sum. Dim sum is like a tea ceremony. It started, I think, as a tea ceremony, but now I think if you're in UK and other parts of the world, you'll see it as going to a restaurant and having lots and lots of dumplings, little bite-sized pieces of dumplings or roast pork and things like that. And I would say that that is my favorite thing to eat in Hong Kong. I don't know if you still have a lot of places in London, for example, where they serve dim sum on trolleys, on pushcart trolleys, but in Hong Kong, that's generally disappeared. But one of the few places that still does it, and it's a lot of fun, is City Hall, and that they have a huge selection of dim sum. So I would recommend that. You can also have 3 Michelin star dim sum at a restaurant called Forum, and that's very refined dim sum as well. Or somewhere like Lung King Heen at the Four Seasons, which used to have 3 Michelin stars, but now it only has 2, but it still has excellent dim sum. So you get great dim sum. And we also have, I think, what used to be the world's cheapest Michelin starred restaurant, and that's called Tim Ho Wan, and they do great dim sum as well.
I've heard of that one. I never went when I was in Hong Kong, but I heard that it was absolutely fantastic. And like you say, like really reasonably priced too.
Yes.
Nice.
That sounds amazing. And what about your favourite thing to drink?
That's easy, martinis.
Nice. Okay.
I like it.
Martinis and dim sum. Like it.
Yes, yes, that would be my drink of choice. There's a bar called Bar Leone that's run by an Italian man who, it's a neighborhood bar, and he makes great drinks and it's got a great atmosphere. So that's one place that I would suggest for it. But also, if you want to go somewhere to have a martini with view, the hotels are great. Or there's quite a new bar called Cardinal Point as well.
We'll have to get those links from you and we'll put those in the episode description.
Yeah, I was tempted to note them down as you were saying.
Yeah, I know. It's also so that I can look at them.
Yeah. So if you had to choose just one day activity to do while in Hong Kong, what would it be?
I would say really just to get out on the streets and wander around Hong Kong. As I said at the start, Hong Kong is really a visually spectacular place. It's there's so much going on. And there are lots of really interesting neighbourhoods. So I think most visitors will either stay around the central Wan Chai neighbourhood or around the Tsim Sha Tsui neighbourhood on the Kowloon side. And it doesn't matter. Most neighbourhoods in Hong Kong, there's so much going on, but you just get out and there are lots of markets. Like if you're in Central, there's the Central Wet Market. In terms of exotic, I would say exotic foods. I mean, some of them you might not know what they are, but it's really interesting to see it. Wan Chai has great markets as well. It has clothing, food, things like that. So there's lots of really interesting markets everywhere. On the other side, there's the night market, the Temple Street market, flower markets, lots of markets to wander around and get lost in. And I think markets are always one of the best places to immerse yourself in any city.
Amazing. That's a great answer. I always think the best way to sort of explore a city is to just get out and walk in the streets and see where you end up. Okay, so almost done with the quick fire round. Your favourite museum or gallery, just to finish us off?
M+. It's a new museum that's opened up in Hong Kong. It is probably the first truly world-class museum that we've had. Hong Kong has been an art hub for quite a long time now. We've had Art Basel here for many, many years, but for a long time we didn't have a truly international museum. And M+ opened during the pandemic, actually. And the building is now an architectural landmark. It sits on the waterfront. It was designed by Herzog and de Meuron, who some of you will recognize because they did the Tate Modern as well, including the Turbine Hall, and they're doing the new building at the Tate Modern as well. So they're big name architects, and they've done a great job with the building here. It's a bit like a giant billboard, actually, and they have visual projections on it. So it's a great museum. It has one of the, if not the best, it's certainly one of the best and most comprehensive contemporary Chinese art collections. It's a SIG collection, really fantastic. One of the things that I love about it is it also has a lot of Asian design elements in there as well, from Japan, Vietnam, and other parts of Asia. And that's quite unusual for people to see pieces of Asian design in a museum.
Is that museum, is it part of the West Kowloon Cultural District? That was built recently, that's right, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and there's another museum there called the Palace Museum.
There is the Palace Museum, and that is also a great museum because it has a lot of it's actually the offshoot of the Palace Museum from Beijing, which I think people will know better as the Forbidden City. So you get artifacts from
Right.
that in the Palace
I
Museum.
was
Oh,
just going to say
wow.
handy that you can kind of like see two, almost like get two for one in the
Yes,
same sort of area.
yes, you can. And it's the
Nice.
precinct is great because it's got a view of Hong Kong as well. And it's popular with families and weekends. You go there, they have music performances, and or you can just go for a stroll around the waterfront.
Perfect day
That
out.
sounds incredible. Yeah, sounds really good. So I know you've already given us some kind of highlights of Hong Kong, but if you had to name a couple more, what are some absolute highlights that you couldn't miss?
I would actually recommend that people do the really touristy things. I think some things are popular with visitors for a reason, and
Yeah,
with Hong Kong, that would be the case. The Star Ferry, for example. I love the Star Ferry. It
so
is
cool.
a Hong Kong icon and it's touristy, but it's great. I take it whenever I can. When I cross the harbour and I have time to do it, I'll take the Star Ferry. The trams are the same. You can take a slow tram from one side of Hong Kong Island to the other. And that's just a great way to see the island because it goes at a leisurely pace. You get to see so much of the street life. It has a nickname called the Ding Ding because of the noise that it makes when it's about to stop or take off, or and it's just a great experience. So I think those sorts of touristy things are great. I would also recommend going up to the Peak, as I've said before. It,
Yeah.
it's I think the Peak is the most popular tourist spot, but for good reason. There's a place on the other side of the harbour from where I live, the Chim Sha Tsui Kowloon side, Avenue of Stars. That will give you probably the best view of the Hong Kong skyline, especially at night.
Nice.
And again, very, very touristy, but worth doing.
Sounds absolutely amazing. I think, like, I definitely, when I went to Hong Kong before, hit up a lot of those sites, and it wasn't anything that you didn't end up going and feel like disappointed. You were just like, this is incredible. It's like so totally worth it. So, yeah, can completely, yeah, understand you recommending those things. Sounds great.
Great. So we know that the touristy things are worth doing, but if listeners do have a bit of extra time, are there any hidden gems that you could share?
I think there are quite a lot. And Rachel, I think you mentioned the hikes that you discovered in Hong Kong and
Yeah.
the country parks. I think they're not so much hidden gems, but things that are under the radar. I think most people don't realize how much of Hong Kong is country parkland, designated country
Yeah.
parks. I think about 40% of Hong Kong, which is for such a small territory, that's a huge
Wow.
amount of
Yeah.
space that's been set aside for country parks. And there are really brilliant hikes that you can do. That was one of the things that I discovered when I was during the pandemic was I did a lot of hiking, and we have, as I said, a lot of fantastic hikes. Probably one of the most beautiful you can do is the McLehose Trail, but that's a
Mm.
100-kilometer trail. So
It's long. Yeah.
yeah, most visitors are unlikely to tackle that, but you can do it in sections, and it goes through some of the most beautiful parts of Hong Kong. It skirts the border of China. Some of it is moderate, but some of it is quite challenging as well. So it depends on the section that you choose. It takes you down to some really beautiful beaches as well. I think, as I said, it just shows you a side of Hong Kong that most people don't see. Even a lot of locals, I think a lot of people who live here don't get to do it that often because it is a little bit out of the way as well. If you want to do a hike that's more accessible, a lot of people, Dragon's Back is probably the most famous hike that you can do, but I would recommend another one called Violet Hill and the Twins. And that is a little bit of a challenging hike because the Violet Hill part is really beautiful. You get to see the city and you're in the mountains, you get to see the reservoirs, but then you get to the section called the Twins, which is, I
Mm.
think, about 1,000 steps up, and it is quite steep. So,
Wow.
so that can be quite challenging. But then at the end of it, you come down to an area called Stanley, and that's a beachside sub neighborhood called Stanley. And that's popular with tourists, and you get really beautiful views of the headlands as you're coming down and the South China Sea. So the hiking, definitely, I would recommend the country parks. Then there are lots of neighborhoods that I think are really interesting. One of them is called Sham
Yeah.
Shui Po. It's in on the Kowloon side. It used to be and still is very much a working class neighborhood. but it used to be a textile center as well. So there are lots of old shops. It hasn't been developed as much as other parts of Hong Kong. It is gentrifying, but there's still a lot of original tenement buildings there, a lot of the old style accommodations, a lot of shops are still there. There's like a bead street, lots of electronic shops, things like that, lots of markets, lots of good local food. Probably, I think the most famous Tim Ho Wan, which is the Michelin star restaurant, is in Sham Shui Po, this famous tofu shop. So really interesting. It's also actually where, because it is one of the poorer neighborhoods in Hong Kong, a lot of the refugees end up in that area, but then you have it's quite a creative, because rents are a little bit cheaper there. So I think, as is the case around the world, because of that, you get quite a lot of creative people there, and there's a good cafe culture there as well.
It's so interesting. There's such diversity across such a small space. Like when you were talking about the hiking and you said the beaches, I was like, of course there's beaches because there's coastline, but it's not, you don't immediately think of that when you think of Hong Kong. You kind of think of the city before you think of all those different landscapes. So amazing diversity.
It is, yes, absolutely. And that's why I think it is great if people have a chance to get out there and explore Hong Kong. This is really quite off the beaten path, but I think really beautiful. It's called the Tzu Shan Monastery. I probably am pronouncing it incorrectly, but it's a monastery out in an area called Tai Po. So it's quite difficult to get to, but it's a monastery that was funded by one of Hong Kong's wealthiest men, Li Ka-shing, and he's a property real estate tycoon, telco tycoon. But the monastery itself is really beautiful. It's very serene, and the architecture is Tang Dynasty style, and there's a big Buddha there as well. It's just surrounded by greenery, by mountains. It's very Zen-like, and you go there. It's very meditative, and I think it's one of the most serene places you can go to in Hong Kong, and quite unlike anywhere else in Hong Kong. And one of the things about it is they cap the numbers. So visitor numbers are strictly limited. So you don't lose that serenity, but you do have to register and book in advance to visit.
That sounds amazing. I've never heard of that spot before. So it's nice to get a real kind of hidden gem for us to add to our list to go and explore.
And then if you're an art lover, there's a district called Wong Chi Hang that's on the south side of Hong Kong Island, and there are lots of world-class galleries there. Some like Kiang Malang, Rossi and Rossi, Blind Spot, Axel Vervoort, who is world famous. He was famous for having one of the best installations or exhibitions at Venice Biennale for many, many years. Yeah, I think he just stopped in the last year, but he's there as well. Ben Brown, who I think is a well-known international gallerist as well. So lots of great galleries down there if you're into art.
That sounds amazing. There's such in terms of, you've got diversity of landscape, and then you've just got an incredible array of things to do within the city as well. That just, from you've got your art galleries, and then you've got your more serene, meditative, monasteries. It just sounds fantastic.
Giving you options.
Yeah, exactly. And so we've talked a bit about food and incredible dim sum, but are there any other dishes in Hong Kong that you would recommend our listeners try?
I mean, I think more in terms of restaurants. I think if you come to Hong Kong, you have to have Chinese food. I think this is the home, or Guangdong province is the home of Cantonese cuisine. So you have to have some of that when you're here. My favorite restaurant is called The Chairman. It was voted Asia's best restaurant a few years ago, and it is my favorite restaurant. And they do, I would say, innovative Cantonese cuisine. It is extremely hard to get a booking, but if you can, I would highly recommend that. Some of their signature dishes are like a steamed floury crab with rice noodles in an aged Chinese wine, rice wine. And then for something a bit more casual, a bit more accessible, a bit more fun, there's a restaurant called Holy Fook. And that's unusual in the sense that it has a female head chef, which is really unusual for a Cantonese restaurant in particular. And the food there is great, and it's a lot of fun. Or for something really local or a lot more local, there's a restaurant called Ship Key. That's where you'll find, as I said, a lot of the staples of Cantonese cuisine, and it's fairly affordable place. I just want to talk about how Hong Kong is such a great food city as well in terms of the diversity of food you can get apart from Cantonese cuisine and Chinese food. You get people who are doing really interesting international cuisine or Asian cuisine. There's a restaurant called Hui, Whey, and it's a Singaporean chef, and he's doing contemporary Singaporean cuisine. His training's in French cooking, so he's using French technique, but with Singaporean food. And then there's another restaurant called Mora, which is a tofu restaurant. And I know some people might think, oh, tofu, I don't know about that. But
I love tofu.
I like tofu.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so good.
I mean, that just got a Michelin star this year, and it's run by the founder is a female chef as well. So I think that's one that's really interesting to check out while you're here. We have an amazing contemporary Latin American restaurant called Mono, and that is on the Asia's 50 Best Restaurants list as well. And so you have this. Well, if I guess the British do love Indian food, there's a great restaurant called Leela, and the chef there actually made his name in London at a restaurant called Chutney Mary's. I don't know if you've heard of it. And then Cameron, and he's in Hong Kong, and he's got a restaurant called Leela doing great modern Indian food. And then if you want, I guess, more traditional or rather more comforting European food, there's a restaurant called Arcane. So you can get the gamut of cuisine here. I think that's one of the beauties of Hong Kong.
Sounds amazing. We'll have to, Rachel, visit for a week, and then we can visit one of those restaurants every day.
Yeah, we can hike during the day and then go to the restaurant during the evening. That sounds absolutely perfect.
Happy to give you tips.
Thanks for that, Kee. A collection of fishing villages that transformed into a hub of international trade, Hong Kong has a rich heritage and unique culture. Its ancient temples, bustling markets, beautiful beaches, and imposing mountains combine to make it one of Asia's most exciting territories. With DK Eyewitness Top 10 Hong Kong, it's yours to explore. So Kee, you've told us all about the best things to do in Hong Kong. If listeners are now ready to visit, when's the best time for them to come?
Definitely autumn. That is usually from September onwards. The summers here can be quite brutal. And the heat, the humidity, it's typhoon season, although that's happening later in the year now. But from September onwards, I would say would be the best time. October generally and November are the most beautiful months. You get lots of sunshine. It's still warm, and I would say if you're not used to it, it can still be hot, but it's beautiful. And then I would say all the way through till about March. April now, it's starting to get quite hot, but it's still bearable. But I would generally avoid the summer months unless you really like heat.
I guess if you want to do the hiking, maybe the autumn is better. It's a bit cooler.
Yes, autumn and winter. When I say winter, Hong Kong doesn't have a winter as such, and it doesn't snow, but it can get surprisingly cool. And I think it catches people out, especially around January and February. The temperature can drop to about 10 degrees or below 10 degrees Celsius, which I think people may not expect.
Yeah, I always think of Hong Kong as being slightly more kind of humid and warmer, but I think that's just probably because the time of the year that I visited, it was maybe in, I can't remember, April or May, maybe when I came.
Yes, it's starting to get hot and humid now.
Yeah. And I'm not very good with humidity, so it was probably absolutely fine, and I was just making a fuss. How about upcoming events for 2024? Is there anything in the calendar that you think our listeners should come to Hong Kong to see or do?
Well, I would say 2024, 2025, because the biggest events have actually just passed or are happening right now. And that would be Art Basel, which was on last week. Art Basel is one of the biggest art events in the world, and Hong Kong is one of the cities where it's held. It is, yes, the city just really comes alive at that time. The Hong Kong Sevens are on right now. They start tomorrow, and that is a big rugby tournament, and it brings in a lot of visitors as well. So that's in Art Basel, Hong Kong, is in March usually. The Sevens is in April. I would say that the Dragon Boat races are fun. That's in June. That's a public holiday. I would say that Mid-Autumn Festival is, there are the two biggest festivals in Hong Kong would be the Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year. That's usually around January, February. It used to be very, very quiet to visit then, but I think Hong Kong now is a more exciting place because they put on more events. They have night parades, fireworks, line dances, things like that. That's, as I said, in January, February, depending on the lunar cycle. And then Mid-Autumn Festival is also based on the lunar cycle. And that's a beautiful time because there's lots of lanterns and it is a major festival. And then there's a music festival called Clock and Flap as well. And that's usually around the end of November, early December.
What kind of music is that?
I would say it would be a lot of bands that I don't know because I'm too old to know them. But they are international music acts as well as
Got you.
Okay.
Hong Kong, local Hong Kong acts and acts from around Asia. But they will get headline acts like who have they had in the past? People like Nile Rodgers. I think they have had the Arctic Monkeys. Just international acts. Some fairly big name international acts, although I would say Hong Kong doesn't get as big a name as somewhere like Singapore, who had Taylor Swift, for example.
Taylor, get Hong Kong on your list.
Yeah.
So Kee, final question. How can travellers make a positive impact when they visit Hong Kong?
I would say the first thing is please come to Hong Kong because Hong Kong has, I feel, been a bit unloved of late and because of geopolitical reasons, but it is still truly a unique city. It is very different from the rest of China. It is still the most international city. And I think if you should come and see for yourself what it's really like. Once you're here, I think it's like most places, you should try and get into the local culture and eat the local foods, support local merchants as much as you can. I think just if you walk around some of the neighborhoods that I talked about later, you'll see what are the traditional places. Hong Kong is a great city, but like many cities and like many cities in Asia, because it's modernizing, a lot of the traditional crafts, a lot of traditional businesses are dying out. So I think if you can find a way to seek them out and support them, then that would be great.
Great. Some great tips there. Thank you so much, Kee.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much to Kee. There's so many restaurants there to add to the list. Oh my gosh, he's made me so hungry. We're coming up to lunch here in the UK and I think I need to have some dim sum. What about you, Rachel?
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling that too. The way that he was describing, especially the dim sum, I'm feeling very hungry as well. And it was quite nice to hear a lot about the different hikes that were available there. So I feel like I've got a lot that I want to try next time I'm in Hong Kong, which is really exciting.
I know, it really sort of, reminded me of the diversity of the place.
Definitely.
Listener, you can follow more of Kee's work at keefoong.com.
And in the next episode, we're off to Mexico City. I'm really excited about that.
Can't wait. Listener, we'll see you then. This podcast was produced by Julia Baker and me, Bella Talbot. For more information about DKI Witness, visit dk.com/travel and follow us on social media at DKI Witness. Please rate, review and follow the show. Your support means so much to us.